The laughter of children, a sound as bright and brilliant as the midday sun glinting off the endless glass of the horizon tower, filled the observation deck. It was a symphony of innocence, a pure, unadulterated joy that echoed 100 stories above the sprawling metropolis. Among them, a mountain of a man with a smile as wide as the panoramic view, stood Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. He was here not as a movie star, but as a special guest for the Skyscrapers of Tomorrow field trip, a treat for a group of inner-city middle schoolers. He'd been answering their questions, a mix of the predictable, "How much can you bench?" and the surprisingly insightful, "Is it scary to do your own stunts?" with his characteristic charm and booming laugh. A young girl with bright, inquisitive eyes named Maya tugged on the sleeve of his tailored suit. "Mr. Johnson," she began, her voice barely a whisper above the excited chatter, "are you ever really scared?" Dwayne crouched down, his massive frame bringing him to her eye level. The bustling city below seemed to fall away. "That's a great question, Maya," he said, his voice a low, gentle rumble. "Everyone gets scared. Being brave isn't about not being scared. It's about being scared and doing the right thing anyway." He tapped the side of his head. "It's about having a plan and the heart to see it through." As he spoke those words, a low, guttural growl vibrated through the floor. It wasn't the familiar hum of the tower's advanced mechanics. It was a deep, unsettling tremor that seemed to emanate from the very bones of the earth. The children's laughter faltered, replaced by a nervous silence. Their teacher, a young woman named Ms. Albright, shot a worried glance at the panoramic windows. The city outside, a moment ago a testament to human ingenuity, now seemed to sway with an unnatural rhythm. Then, the growl became a roar. The floor lurched violently, a monstrous, unseen hand shaking the colossal structure. The children screamed, a chorus of terror that pierced the air. The lights flickered and died, plunging the observation deck into a disorienting twilight, the only illumination coming from the chaotic dance of the city lights below. A network of hairline cracks snaked across the vast expanse of the reinforced glass, a spiderweb of impending doom. For a heartbeat, frozen in the surreal tableau of fear, Dwayne Johnson was just a man, a father whose own children flashed in his mind's eye. The primal fear was a cold fist in his gut. But then, Maya's terrified whimper, a small, fragile sound in the cacophony of chaos, reached him. And in that instant, the man became the Rock. His training, his discipline, the very essence of the heroes he portrayed on screen, surged to the forefront. He had a plan, and he had the heart to see it through. "Everyone get down." His voice, a thunderous command that cut through the panic, was a beacon in the terrifying darkness. He moved with a speed that belied his size, a blur of muscle and determination, ushering the terrified children and their shell-shocked teacher away from the groaning windows and towards the solid core of the building. The tower swayed again, a sickening, pendulum-like motion that sent a shower of glass from a shattered display case raining down. Dwayne shielded a small boy with his own body, the shards peppering his back like a volley of tiny, sharp needles. He didn't flinch. The initial, violent shaking subsided, replaced by an eerie, groaning symphony of stressed metal and crumbling concrete. A fine dust, the ghost of the building's agony, filled the air, catching the faint, emergency lights that now flickered to life, casting long, dancing shadows. The children were huddled together, a knot of trembling fear. Ms. Albright, her face pale but her eyes resolute, was trying to comfort them, her voice a strained whisper of reassurance. Dwayne took a quick, professional assessment of the situation. The main elevators would be a death trap. The emergency exits, he needed to find them, and fast. He saw a panel on the wall, marked Emergency Stairwell. He strode towards it, his every movement purposeful. He ripped the panel off the wall with a single, powerful tug, revealing a heavy, steel door. He wrenched at the handle. It was jammed. The quake had warped the frame. For a moment, a flicker of doubt. But then, he saw the faces of the children, their eyes wide with a mixture of terror and a fragile, desperate hope, a hope that was fixed squarely on him. He took a deep breath, planted his feet, and with a roar that seemed to shake the very foundations of his soul, he slammed his shoulder into the door. The metal groaned in protest. He hit it again, the impact echoing like a gunshot. On the third, desperate attempt, the lock shattered, and the door scraped open, revealing a dark, foreboding stairwell. The first step to survival was taken. But as he peered into the abyss, a new, more terrifying sound reached them. The groan of twisting steel from above, a harbinger of a new, and perhaps more deadly, threat. The fortress in the sky was beginning to crumble. Part 2. The darkness of the emergency stairwell was a stark contrast to the airy expanse of the observation deck. It was a narrow, concrete canyon, the air thick with the smell of dust and something acrid, like burning wires. The only sounds were the ragged breaths of the children, the distant, mournful groaning of the wounded skyscraper, and the steady, reassuring thud of Dwayne Johnson's heavy boots on the metal steps. He led the way, a human shield between the terrified children and the unknown dangers that lurked in the descending darkness. He had fashioned a makeshift torch from a discarded piece of metal and a strip of cloth from his own shirt, a small, flickering flame that cast dancing shadows on the walls, a fragile beacon in the oppressive gloom. After what felt like an eternity of descending steps, their path was blocked. A massive concrete beam, dislodged from the ceiling, had crashed down, completely obstructing the stairwell. It was a testament to the sheer, raw power of the earthquake, a brutal reminder of their precarious situation. A wave of despair washed over the small group. The children's whimpers grew louder, their fragile hope beginning to crumble like the concrete around them. "It's okay," Dwayne said, his voice calm and steady, a rock in the turbulent sea of their fear. "We just need to find another way." He ran his hand over the rough surface of the beam, his mind racing, calculating, searching for a solution. There was a small gap, a narrow, triangular space between the beam and the wall, barely large enough for a child to squeeze through. "I have an idea," he announced, his voice imbued with a confidence he didn't entirely feel. He turned to the oldest boy, a lanky teenager named Leo who had been trying to put on a brave face. "Leo, I need you to be my second in command. I'm going to brace this beam. I need you to help the others through that gap. Can you do that for me?" Leo, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe, could only nod. The responsibility, the trust placed in him by his hero, seemed to momentarily banish his own terror. Dwayne turned to the beam, his muscles coiling like a panther about to strike. He found his footing, planted his feet wide, and with a guttural roar that seemed to echo the groaning of the building itself, he pressed his shoulder against the immense weight of the concrete. The strain was immense. The veins in his neck stood out like thick cords, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated effort. The beam didn't move. "Come on," he gritted out, his voice a raw, strained whisper. He pushed again, every fiber of his being focused on this single, impossible task. He could feel the pressure on his bones, the scream of his protesting muscles. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. And then, with a sound like the grinding of tectonic plates, the beam shifted. Just an inch. But it was enough. "Now. Go now," he yelled, his voice cracking with the strain. Leo, his fear replaced by a surge of adrenaline, sprang into action. He helped the first child, a small, sobbing girl, through the narrow opening. One by one, the children squeezed through the tight space, their small, trembling hands reaching out for the reassuring grip of Ms. Albright on the other side. Each child that made it through was a small victory, a flicker of hope in the suffocating darkness. But the tower was not done with them yet. As the last child, Maya, was wriggling her way through the gap, a violent aftershock rocked the building. The beam shifted again, the gap narrowing with a terrifying, grinding sound. Maya screamed, her leg trapped. Dwayne roared in defiance, a primal sound of raw power and protective fury. He pushed with a strength he didn't know he possessed, a strength born of desperation and a fierce, unwavering determination to protect these children. The concrete groaned, and the gap widened just enough for Maya to pull her leg free. She scrambled through, collapsing into the waiting arms of her teacher. Exhausted, his muscles screaming in protest, Dwayne let the beam settle back into its new position. He was trapped. The gap was now too small for him to fit through. He was on the wrong side of the impossible obstacle he had just overcome for the sake of the children. He looked at their terrified faces, peering at him from the other side of the concrete barrier, and he knew he had to keep them moving. "It's all right," he said, his voice raspy but his smile unwavering. "You guys keep going. Find another way down. I'll find another way." He wouldn't let them see his own fear, the cold dread that was now seeping into his bones. He was their rock, and a rock does not crumble. He watched them go, their small, flickering torch disappearing into the darkness below, leaving him alone in the suffocating silence, a solitary sentinel in the heart of the wounded giant. Part 3. The silence that descended after the children's footsteps faded was a heavy, suffocating blanket. Alone in the tomb-like darkness of the stairwell, with a multi-ton concrete beam as his cell door, the enormity of his situation crashed down on Dwayne Johnson. The adrenaline that had fueled his impossible feat of strength began to wane, replaced by a cold, creeping dread. He was trapped, separated from the very people he had sworn to protect. He could hear the building groaning around him, a constant, mournful symphony of a dying giant. For a moment, he allowed himself to feel the fear, the raw, human terror of being alone and helpless in the face of such overwhelming destruction. But then, the image of Maya's terrified eyes and the memory of her innocent question, "Are you ever really scared?" flashed in his mind. He had told her that being brave was about being scared and doing the right thing anyway. And he knew, with a certainty that burned brighter than any fear, that he had to live up to those words. He had to find a way out, not just for himself, but for them. They would be looking for him. They would be counting on him. He began to explore his concrete prison, his hands running over the rough, cold walls. The stairwell was a dead end. But as he ran his hand along the wall opposite the beam, he felt it, a faint, almost imperceptible draft. He pressed his ear to the wall, and he could hear a faint, metallic rattling, the sound of something loose. Hope, a fragile, flickering candle in the darkness, ignited within him. He used his makeshift torch to examine the wall more closely. It was a service shaft, the source of the draft a small, metal ventilation grate, no bigger than a dinner plate. It was a long shot, a desperate, almost insane idea. But it was the only one he had. He began to work at the grate, his powerful fingers prying at the edges. The screws were old and rusted, the metal warped by the quake. It was slow, agonizing work. The skin on his fingertips tore, and a trickle of blood ran down his hand, but he didn't stop. He worked with a relentless, focused intensity, his every muscle, every ounce of his being, concentrated on this one, small task. After what felt like hours, with a final, painful wrench, the grate came free. He peered into the darkness of the shaft. It was a vertical tunnel, a dizzying drop into nothingness, filled with a chaotic jumble of pipes and cables. It was a death trap, but it was also a way out. He took a deep breath, the dust-filled air searing his lungs, and began to climb. It was a treacherous, agonizing ascent. The pipes were slick with a thin film of grime, the cables cutting into his hands. His muscles, already pushed to their absolute limit, screamed in protest. Every handhold, every foothold, was a gamble, a test of strength and will. He climbed in near total darkness, the only light the faint, flickering glow of his makeshift torch, which he held precariously in his teeth. He climbed past floors that had been completely pancaked, the concrete and steel twisted into grotesque, unrecognizable shapes. He saw glimpses of the devastation the earthquake had wrought, a terrifying, surreal diorama of destruction. He saw office chairs hanging precariously from shattered floors, and personal belongings, a child's drawing, a forgotten coffee mug, scattered amidst the rubble, poignant reminders of the lives that had been so brutally interrupted. The physical toll was immense. His body was a symphony of pain. His hands were raw and bleeding, his muscles trembling with exhaustion. But he refused to give in. He was fueled by a primal, unwavering determination, a promise he had made not just to the children, but to himself. He would not fail them. After what felt like an eternity, he saw it, a faint glimmer of light from above. It was a maintenance hatch, its frame slightly ajar. With a final, desperate surge of strength, he pulled himself up, his fingers hooking onto the edge of the hatch. He hung there for a moment, his body screaming in protest, the vast, dark emptiness of the shaft below him. Then, with a roar of pure, unadulterated will, he hauled himself up and through the opening, collapsing onto the floor of a darkened corridor, his body trembling, his lungs burning, but he was out. He was free. He lay there for a moment, the rough carpet a welcome comfort after the cold, hard steel of the shaft. He had made it. But he knew his ordeal was far from over. He had to find the children. He pushed himself to his feet, his body a symphony of aches and pains, and began to make his way through the darkened, debris-strewn corridor, his every step a testament to his unbreakable spirit. The Rock was back in the game. Part 4. The corridor was a chaotic obstacle course, a testament to the building's agony. Fallen ceiling tiles crunched under Dwayne's boots, and exposed electrical wires sparked ominously in the gloom. He moved with a cautious urgency, his senses on high alert, his eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of the children. The silence was unnerving, a stark contrast to the earlier cacophony of the earthquake. It was the silence of a tomb. He called out their names, his voice a hoarse, desperate cry that was swallowed by the oppressive darkness. Maya, Leo, Ms. Albright. Only the mournful groan of the building answered him. A cold knot of fear tightened in his chest. Had he been too slow? Had something happened to them? He pushed the thought from his mind. He couldn't afford to despair. He had to keep moving. He had to find them. He rounded a corner and saw it. A faint, flickering light from under a partially collapsed doorway. It was the familiar, warm glow of a torch. His heart leaped. He rushed towards the light, his exhaustion forgotten, his body fueled by a fresh surge of adrenaline. He pushed his way through the debris, and there they were. They were huddled together in a small, relatively intact office, their faces a mixture of relief and disbelief at the sight of him. Maya was the first to see him. "Mr. Johnson," she cried, her voice a mixture of awe and joy. She ran to him, her small arms wrapping around his massive legs. The other children followed, their tear-streaked faces lighting up with a renewed sense of hope. Ms. Albright, her face etched with exhaustion but her eyes shining with gratitude, could only whisper, "We knew you'd find us." Their reunion was a brief, poignant moment of respite in the ongoing nightmare. But Dwayne knew they weren't safe yet. He could feel the building shifting around them, the groans of stressed metal growing louder, more insistent. They had to get out. Now. He led them through the labyrinthine corridors, his powerful frame a shield against the falling debris. He was their guide, their protector, their unshakable rock in a world that was literally falling apart around them. They encountered another obstacle, a collapsed section of the floor, a gaping chasm that dropped into the darkness below. There was no way around it. For a moment, it seemed their journey was at an end. But then, Dwayne's eyes fell on a thick, industrial-grade power cable, still attached to the ceiling on the other side of the chasm. It was a risky, almost insane idea, but it was their only chance. He explained the plan, his voice calm and reassuring, despite the terrifying risk. He would swing across first, and then, one by one, he would help them across. The children looked at him, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and a blind, unwavering trust. He took a running start, his powerful legs propelling him forward. He leaped into the abyss, his hands closing around the thick cable. He swung across the chasm, the wind whistling past his ears, his body a pendulum of pure muscle and determination. He landed on the other side with a jarring thud, his feet finding a secure hold on the crumbling floor. He then became the anchor, the steady, unmoving force on the other side. One by one, he helped the children across, his powerful arms pulling them to safety. Leo, the lanky teenager, went first, his initial fear replaced by a determined resolve. Then came the others, their small, trembling bodies swinging across the terrifying gap, their trust in their hero absolute. Finally, it was Ms. Albright's turn, and then Maya's, her small hand gripping his with a strength that belied her size. They were all across. They were safe. But the building had one last, terrifying surprise for them. As Maya landed safely in his arms, the floor beneath them gave a final, shuddering groan and began to collapse. There was no time to think, no time to plan. There was only instinct. Dwayne scooped Maya up in one arm, and with a roar of primal fury, he ran. He ran towards the large, panoramic window, the city lights a dizzying, chaotic blur below. He ran with the last, desperate ounce of his strength, the floor crumbling behind him, a wave of destruction nipping at his heels. He reached the window, and, without a moment's hesitation, he leaped. He crashed through the reinforced glass, a shower of glittering shards exploding around them. For a heart-stopping moment, they were suspended in midair, 100 stories above the ground. Below them, a massive, inflatable rescue cushion, hastily deployed by the emergency services, weighted like a giant, welcoming pillow. They hit the cushion with a jarring, whooshing impact, the air rushing out of it, cushioning their fall. They were safe. They were alive. As the paramedics rushed towards them, Dwayne lay on the cushion, Maya still cradled in his arms, her small body trembling but her eyes shining with a mixture of awe and adoration. He looked up at the wounded skyscraper, a skeletal silhouette against the night sky, and he knew that he had faced his greatest fear, not in a movie studio with a green screen, but in the heart of a real-life inferno. He had been scared, but he had done the right thing. He had been their rock. And in the tear-filled eyes of the children he had saved, he saw the truest, most profound meaning of the word hero.